Hi everyone. Today let's talk about Broadcom earnings as well as Lululemon. Then we'll look at the economic data. Then we'll look at the charts. Then we'll look at my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Broadcom earnings came in okay, but they put out some guidance that was pretty mild. You can see it was up on the day, but it's down a little bit after hours. Earnings per share, $10.54, compared with $10.43 expectation. So not terrible, up 5% from a year ago. In terms of fourth quarter projections for revenue, expecting $9.27 billion, again, 4% from a year ago. It is growth, but not very much. Of course, they say this growth was driven by network technologies related to their AI clusters, so AI still driving some growth here with Broadcom. It makes sense. If you look at adjusted EBITDA, you can see it's up 8% from a year earlier, and free cash flows was up 7% from a year earlier. The company also repurchased $2.2 billion worth of common shares this quarter. Overall, not terrible, but the growth story is slowing slightly. Moving over to Lulu, they destroyed earnings as they typically do. They continue to maintain a high rate of growth. You can see profits jumping 18%. They raised their full year guidance. Everything's still looking good. Full year expectations now between $9.51 and $9.57 billion for the year. And based on that raised guidance, you can see we're now expecting about 30 to 40 cents more per share in terms of earnings over the year. Earnings per share for this quarter beat by over 10 cents. Revenue also beating. Everything still looks good. And the shares did go up a little bit after hours based on this report. Moving over to the economic calendar, CPI for Europe came in at expectations for core year over year. Month over month was higher than expectations, not what you would want to see. Same for headline year over year. Unemployment rate in line with expectations. U.S. jobless claims much better than expectations. Pretty interesting. Previous number was revised up slightly though. PCE data was absolutely in line across the board, and that really didn't do much for markets. In terms of Fed balance sheet, declined by a little bit over $10 billion as they continue to sell assets. Looking at Friday, this is the big one with non-farm payrolls coming out at 8:30 Eastern, as well as private non-farms at the same time. Unemployment rate expected to stay steady. You also have ISM manufacturing PMI, ISM manufacturing prices at 10 o'clock Eastern, and those should be fairly interesting as well. Moving over to Max Payne just for a moment, you can see 1.1 million options, put call ratio at 2, put wall still here at 440. Top of the puts now is up around 452.50 or 454, right in this zone, which would give us about 0.5% of upside on the Friday session if we did finish at the top of the puts. Right now we're sitting at 450, Max Payne at 445, so it's not impossible that we kind of dip down into this midpoint. And as we look at the markets, we'll talk about how we had some indecision across markets, pretty much sideways on the day. So it could mean that we're going to slip back down into this kind of dip area where we're kind of balanced in markets, certainly possible. We are still slightly bullish, and we'll look at that as well, which would indicate more towards the top of the puts potentially for the end of the Friday session. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the SPY on the hour and the daily chart. You can see the SPY was actually slightly negative on the day, even though we had bullish momentum. RSI still stable on the daily chart, but you can see we tagged that daily trend line that I was watching. We hit it yesterday on the hourly chart, but I mentioned that we did not get it on the daily. We did now here today. We also threw a wick very close to my next level at 353.07, and then we ended up breaking down from that level. Momentum flipped bearish throughout the day. RSI came down to that 50 line. Overall, shorter term charts starting to flip. We're below the 9 and 21 EMAs. They have also crossed on the hourly chart, so this is a short-term technical downtrend, which is absolutely interesting. At this point, you would expect to come down at least to the 55, down at 448.37. I also have a level here at 448.74. You have the shorter-term trend that we've been watching, going back to this grinding price action before the bigger spike up. If we did get back into this range, you can see there would be several levels of support that are worth watching. Daily chart, at this point, it looks like we are setting up a lower high off of that trend line. And this is kind of what I was afraid of yesterday. If we did move a little bit higher, like I talked about, there was some clear resistance, and that does seem to be what we're getting now. Of course, that could all change with the non-farms. The jobs data earlier in the week pushed markets much, much higher on the Tuesday session. So if we get good jobs data again, and good in this case means bad jobs data, then we might see another spike up, certainly possible, but it is worth noting that that shorter term trend is now bearish. Moving over to the Qs on the hour and the daily, a little bit different. So the Qs were still bullish on the day, up 0.3%, did wick that next level, as well as the trend line here. You can see we came off of that level and then went sideways basically throughout the rest of the day. Momentum still bearish, just like the SPY. RSI a little bit stronger. It is still moving lower, but it is above the 50 line, so it looks a little bit cleaner. Still trading between this 376.45 and 378.77 levels, just like we were at the close yesterday. So no change on levels. Did have a bit of a wick rejection on the daily chart. Again, still bullish, but showing a little bit of hesitation, kind of like it did yesterday. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, both of these were much more bearish than the others. You can see that big red candle here on the 11 o'clock, coming off of that 200 SMA like we talked about yesterday. We hit it yesterday, but now we got into that zone through a wick higher, broke down from that level. Now we're just above VWAP on the 4-hour, below the 9 EMA. Momentum starting to tip lower. This looks more bearish. Certainly could come down into this 187.15 area. That would be my next support. You also have the 21 EMA sitting at 186.71. Overall looking more bearish than it did yesterday. Dow absolutely looking bearish. Gapped up, hit that 350.92 level, threw a wick to the upside, and then broke all the way down to my next level at 347.67. Honestly, I would expect this to hit the 200 SMA and maybe even down to the 21, down at 346.59. So could throw a wick lower, but again, momentum moving lower, RSI moving lower. These look more bearish, like I said, than the SPY or the NASDAQ. Moving over to the equal weighted S&Ps, we are still holding that 149.82 level. Gapped up, fell throughout the session, very similar to the Dow. Momentum still bullish, but RSI looking to break down below that 50 line. If it does, that's going to look quite bearish. Again, looking for that lower high established, and then potentially pulling down to make a lower low. Certainly possible. Again, the trigger for that would be that 149.82 level breaking, and you also have the 21 EMA sitting just below it at 149.47. If this level holds, you could absolutely look for a push higher, but that's not what we're looking at least in the short term. Moving over to the earnings plays with Lulu and Broadcom, you can see Lulu throwing a big wick down to support at 362.20. We've been watching this one for a long time. I haven't talked about it recently because it really has been moving sideways for a while here after the big spike up from down around that 289 area up to 385-ish. Right in this zone, you can see how much volume was done here. Continues to hover in that zone, and if this breaks out from current prices, that could be a nice little move from here. We're currently sitting at that level after hours after the announcement. Momentum bullish, RSI not overbought yet, so it might be interesting to watch going into tomorrow's session. Broadcom, on the other hand, you can see that big down move on earnings. Their guidance was not great. Their growth is slowing. On the day, we kind of threw a wick to these previous highs, crossed that 909.86 level, and then rejected from there, and we're back down to that 55 EMA area, as well as the 21 sitting down at 867.04. You also have trend support right in this area around 867.14. Definitely interesting area, but it's not really giving any kind of clear direction. We're still technically chopping higher, but that earnings announcement could cause this to break structure. And if it did, and we pushed all the way down to 819, that could be a pretty substantial move to the downside. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Both of them basically chop sideways, not a whole lot of movement. Definitely some indecision in markets here today. Still holding 186.81, and it was still slightly bullish on the day. Still quite a bit of room up to that next level and a technical bull trend. Momentum definitely fading, definitely overbought. So I would be patient here. You can still use 186.81 as a stop, looking for that bullish push. But understand we've had a pretty big move into this area, and this move from 176.15 up to current levels has been quite dramatic without very many pullbacks. It certainly could pull back from current levels. Tesla, similarly, chopped sideways once again, still holding above all of the levels and all of the EMAs. So technically a bull trend, but look at this momentum continuing to tick down. Not a lot of price movement. And if this level breaks here at 255, you really have to be patient because this could go all the way down to 232.57 or even all the way at this previous low around 214. Moving over to staples and discretionary, we really haven't seen rotation into safety quite yet. Staples rejecting off of that 55 EMA like we talked about that potentially happening yesterday. Needed to see that break for a push to 74. Didn't happen. Actually gapped lower through a wick and then moved lower. Could still hold at the 21 or the 72.50 area. Certainly possible. You can see a highly traded zone at these previous lows. But it's not really moving higher like we would expect if we were moving over into those safer stocks. Discretionary did push higher today, did break down towards the end of the session. It is holding above my 170.68 level, so it's still technically bullish, above all the EMAs and SMAs on the 4-hour chart. Momentum starting to fade slightly. We did hit overbought conditions just for a moment. Again, technical bull trend. We got above this trend line as well, and you could look for a push up to 174.76. But again, I would be a little bit careful and keep a very tight stop. Moving over to breadth, we basically got what we expected. So we talked about that 50-day average hitting the 21, started to reject from that area. Momentum is still bullish, so you could absolutely come down, establish a higher low, and then rally. Certainly a possibility. But right now it does look like we're going to get at least a shorter term pullback. 200-day average, still indecision, but slightly bearish. There's just a lot of resistance in this area here. And zooming in, you can see what I'm talking about. You got the 21 right on top of it, the 200 SMA, and then you have the 144 EMAs. So a bunch of resistance, momentum slightly bullish, but RSI clearly bearish still below the 50 line on both charts. And it does seem like breadth is starting to pull back. Again, certainly could establish a lower high or even a double bottom, which would give you a little bit more confirmation to the upside. But if it rejects from here and takes out this previous low, then we could be looking for a much lower low in equities. Moving over to the dollar on the hour and the daily, we talked about how 3 days in a row of bearish price action was potentially going to materialize in at least a little bit of a pullback. And sure enough, you can see that here. Got an absolutely bullish day. Coming off of that level, established a slightly higher low, rallied right up to that next level, and we are hovering right there. Clearly an important level. Makes a lot of sense. Overall, this is still bearish now. We still have bearish momentum. Could be a shorter term pullback, establish a lower high, and then get that bigger breakdown. Certainly possible. But you do have to respect this bullish day. Definitely an engulfing candle. You need to see it get above 103.64. If it holds above that, you could look for a push up to this previous high, establish that double top, and then look for a bearish move. Certainly possible. Obviously, if it takes that level out, we're going to be looking for more bullish price action, potentially up to 105.50, which should spell more weakness for equities. Moving over to bonds, J&K continuing to show indecision at this level. Gap down, rallied, basically unchanged between the 2 days. Still holding this trend line, so certainly possible. We're just pulling back slightly, looking for a rally up to these previous highs. This could be interesting to watch here tomorrow. Momentum bullish, RSI still looking a little bit bullish. TLT, on the other hand, did gap higher, did hold above 96.50, but there is clearly a wick rejection on that, which is interesting. So slightly bullish going into tomorrow, in my opinion. But again, I would be a little bit hesitant. Moving over to volatility, move index breaking below trend. We've had a couple of instances where this has happened, so it might just be a quick little overthrow and then a bounce. But if this starts to break down from this bigger structure, that could absolutely be interesting. Maybe we see bonds start to head a little bit higher as we start to anticipate the topping out of yields. Certainly interesting. VIX, absolutely downtrending. Although we showed hesitance, volatility is continuing to go lower. Certainly interesting. We're in this previous zone, so could hold here, might wick down all the way to trend support at 1297. That would be interesting, still watching that level. But like I said, definitely in this consolidation. We hit oversold conditions on RSI, which is also interesting. Got a 2806 read, and this has been a substantial move lower. And like I said, it wouldn't shock me if we did get a little bit of a bounce going into tomorrow or the next day. Moving over to my accounts, I don't know how they do this P&L. It is all over the place, but I was just short of net $400 on the day in terms of liquidity. So pretty good day, not bad at all. Looking at the IWM, I still have that covered call. That 189 call is starting to protect me to the downside. We talked about how that looked a little bit weaker, so I ended up selling a 190 call for Tuesday for 57 cents. This is a little bit risky, but like I said, it did move down today, and I think it looks a little bit bearish going into tomorrow's session, so I wanted a little bit more protection. Qs, I let 200 shares go. I didn't want to roll that out anymore. I couldn't really get any good credits without paying a substantial amount of money. So I ended up selling some more puts for 376 for tomorrow for 91 cents each, and then no change here to my 373 calls on those 200 shares. And based on this credit, I have about 80 more cents or $80 worth of potential profit, meaning that I'm looking to sell these shares here at 378.81. And you can see just about 80 more cents of potential profit, but I'm also protected all the way down to 373 for a max profit, which still keeps me a little bit safer considering that markets look a little bit more bearish going into tomorrow's session, and that is my bias, neutral to slightly bearish for tomorrow's session. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of Broadcom or Lulu earnings. Is Broadcom going to pull down the markets, or is Lulu a good buy? Or both. Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. And make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.